Imagine you've been playing a role so long, you've forgotten you're playing it. The version of you that shows up to work, the version that shows up at family dinners, the version your friends know. Somewhere underneath all of them, there's supposed to be a real one. But what if you've spent so many years switching between masks that you genuinely can't remember which face is actually yours? Carl Jung believed this happens to almost everyone, and that most people never notice it happening at all. Jung put it more precisely: a mask designed to make an impression on others while concealing who you actually are. Jung had a specific word for this: the persona. It's not a modern term he invented from nothing. He borrowed it deliberately from the Latin word for the masks worn by actors in classical theater. An actor puts on a mask to play a role the audience needs to see. The mask isn't fake, exactly. It serves a real purpose. But the actor underneath it is not the mask. Jung's argument was that every one of us does the same thing constantly, without a stage or a script. The persona is the face we present to the world, the compromise between who we actually are and what our family, our job, our culture expects us to be. But over enough years, something shifts. They stop experiencing it as a role they're playing and start experiencing it as simply who they are. And when it cracks, it doesn't feel like removing a mask. It feels like their entire identity is collapsing. Jung had a term for this too: persona inflation. It's what happens when a person identifies so completely with the mask that they lose access to everything underneath it. The tragedy isn't wearing the mask, it's forgetting there was ever a face under it. Why does this happen so easily? Jung's answer was that the persona forms through genuine necessity, early and often invisibly. Children learn extremely fast which parts of themselves earn approval and which parts get punished, ignored, or shamed. A child who is praised only for being cheerful learns to lead with cheerfulness and bury frustration. A child who is only taken seriously when they're achieving something learns to lead with achievement and bury rest. None of this is a conscious decision. It's an adaptation. This connects to something Jung considered essential to psychological health: the difference between the persona and what he called the self, the deeper, more complete self that includes everything a person has repressed, avoided, or never had permission to become. This isn't a purely modern problem. Renaissance court life ran almost entirely on persona management. A courtier's survival depended on presenting exactly the right face to exactly the right person. The mask wasn't optional. It was a survival mechanism inside a system with real consequences for showing the wrong face to the wrong person. But over enough years, something shifts. They stop experiencing it as a role they're playing and start experiencing it as simply who they are. And when it cracks, it doesn't feel like removing a mask. It feels like their entire identity is collapsing. Jung had a term for this too: persona inflation. It's what happens when a person identifies so completely with the mask that they lose access to everything underneath it. The tragedy isn't wearing the mask, it's forgetting there was ever a face under it. Why does this happen so easily? Jung's answer was that the persona forms through genuine necessity, early and often invisibly. Children learn extremely fast which parts of themselves earn approval and which parts get punished, ignored, or shamed. Second, a sense of exhaustion, specifically tied to social performance rather than to physical effort. The tiredness of maintaining an image rather than doing a task. Third, and perhaps the clearest, feeling a flash of panic or shame at the idea of someone seeing you when you're not performing at all, unfiltered, unproductive, simply existing without the mask on. None of these mean something is wrong with you. Jung would say they mean the mask has done its job so well that it started running the show. Second, a sense of exhaustion, specifically tied to social performance rather than to physical effort. The tiredness of maintaining an image rather than doing a task. Third, and perhaps the clearest, feeling a flash of panic or shame at at the idea of someone seeing you when you're not performing at all, unfiltered, unproductive, simply existing without the mask on. None of these mean something is wrong with you. Jung would say they mean the mask has done its job so well that it started running the show.
Jung's proposed answer was not to discard the persona. He was explicit that this isn't realistic or even desirable. Life genuinely requires social masks. His answer was integration, maintaining conscious awareness that the persona is a tool you're using, not a container you live inside. In practice, this tends to look like a few specific habits. Deliberately spending time in contexts with zero performance requirement. Not productive, not impressive, not curated for anyone's approval. Noticing, without judgment, the moments where you feel yourself performing a version of confidence, competence, or cheerfulness you don't actually feel. Not to stop performing entirely, but to stay aware it's happening. And perhaps most importantly, tolerating the discomfort of being seen imperfectly by at least one or two people, rather than requiring every relationship to only ever see the finished, managed version. This is slow, unglamorous work. What it produces, over time, is something closer to what Jung called individuation. Not becoming a different person, but becoming a fuller one, where the mask and the face underneath it are no longer strangers to each other. Maybe the goal was never to stop wearing masks entirely. Maybe it's simply to remember, every so often, that you're wearing one, and to make sure there's still someone underneath it who knows the difference. If this resonated, our earlier video on why intelligence can create isolation explores a related question. What happens when the self underneath the mask sees the world differently than everyone performing around it? Every answer has a deeper reason. Subscribe for the next one in this series. The version you present online, curated and edited before anyone else ever sees it. It started small. A teenager who noticed that calm, capable behavior earned relief in a house where things often felt unstable. Then a young employee who noticed that being the one who never pushed back got them trusted with more responsibility. Then a parent who noticed that holding everything together kept their own children from feeling the weight they'd once felt themselves. Each of these was a reasonable adaptation, made for good reasons, at a moment when it genuinely worked. But adaptations don't announce their own expiration date. And when it finally cracks, when they get sick or burn out or simply run out of the energy the role required, it doesn't feel like removing a mask. It feels like their entire identity is collapsing. Not because they were pretending all along, but because they'd stopped being able to tell the difference between the role and themselves. Jung wrote about this a century ago, working from clinical observation. Decades later, a sociologist arrived at something strikingly similar from a completely different direction. In 1983, Arlie Russell Hochschild, a sociologist at UC Berkeley, published a study of flight attendants and bill collectors that introduced a concept she called emotional labor. She distinguished between what she termed surface acting, simply adjusting your outward expression, and deep acting, actually working to feel the emotion you're required to display. Her most striking finding was about the cost of doing this constantly, professionally, for years. Workers who had spent long enough performing warmth on demand described becoming estranged, not just from their own expressions, but from their own actual feelings underneath them. A flight attendant's practiced smile stopped being something she put on and became difficult to distinguish from an actual smile at all. This is Jung's persona inflation, documented independently in a completely different field, half a century later, with real workers instead of philosophical argument. Two very different researchers looking at the same human tendency to lose the thread between the mask and the face. A courtier's survival depended on presenting exactly the right face to exactly the right person, in a system where showing genuine irritation to the wrong nobleman could end a career, or worse. Historical accounts describe courtiers who, after years of this, described no longer being certain which of their opinions were genuinely their own. What's notable is how closely this mirrors Hochschild's flight attendants, separated by 4 centuries.
Different stakes, same underlying mechanism. Sustained performance eventually blurring into identity.
This is close to what Hochschild's workers described as emotional exhaustion, distinct from ordinary tiredness. This sounds simple, and almost never is, because most adults have quietly stopped having any such spaces at all. This single habit, just naming it internally in the moment, is close to what separates surface acting from something more sustainable. The performance doesn't have to stop, but you stay awake inside it. This is often the hardest of the three, because it requires risking a reaction you can't fully control. Maybe the goal was never to stop wearing masks entirely. Maybe it's simply to remember every so often that you're wearing one, and to make sure there's still someone underneath it who knows the difference. If this resonated, our earlier video on why intelligence can create isolation explores a related question. What happens when the self underneath the mask sees the world differently than everyone performing around it? If this made you think, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for the next one. Every answer has a deeper